Support for Seattle Now comes from the Pacific Northwest Waterways Association with the Columbia Snake River System, providing clean energy and sustainable commerce as Washington aims for carbon neutrality by 2030. Learn more at pnwa.net/rivervalues.
Hey, it's Patricia Murphy. It's Tuesday, and this is Seattle Now. Pre-COVID, women were making progress at work, but the pandemic has really set us back. More women are leaving the workforce to take care of business at home, and that's different than in past recessions. In a minute, author Richika Tulsian explains why it's a problem for all of us. But first, let's get you caught up. 2 people are facing charges in connection to protest violence. King County prosecutors charged Jacob Greenberg and Danielle McMillan with reckless burning. Greenberg is also charged with assault. Police say he hit an officer in the head with a bat. At a press conference Monday, Seattle's interim police chief, Adrian Diaz, called for property destruction and violence against police officers to stop. COVID cases are still ticking up, so it's no surprise that Canada extended its border restrictions for non-essential travel again. The crossing has been closed since March, and that will now last through November 21st. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau last week said the border will stay closed until the U.S. gets a handle on its coronavirus cases. And if you've already voted, you probably know you can track your ballot online. But if you still need more election fun, check out the county's live stream of election workers processing ballots. Yep, live election sorting and processing. Democracy in action right there on the King County election website. Reminder, you can still register to vote in November's election until October 26th. Women are leaving the workforce in droves since the pandemic kicked in. In September alone, more than 800,000 women left. That's 4 times more than the number of men who left work the same month. Richika Tulsian is the author of The Diversity Advantage, Fixing Gender Inequality in the Workplace. Richika, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you, Patricia.
Ruchika, it seems like we were starting to make some progress on issues of gender and the workplace before COVID. So let's rewind the tape first. What was the picture for women pre-COVID in the workplace?
There was definitely some momentum being gained. I mean, firstly, I know in Washington State, especially having such a generous and really amazing paid family leave policy rolling in 2020 was really exciting. I was seeing a lot more women in leadership positions. A lot more organizations were starting to really address gender inequality and asking, the right questions. What do women need to be successful in the workplace, and how can we make sure that those structural barriers are lifted? So I definitely started the year very positive. I will tell you that.
Okay, so we're having the right conversations, and in some cases there is action being taken. Then COVID hit, and what changed?
Oh my gosh, literally everything shifted. This is both my own experience and then research backs it up. And already we were talking about how women are feeling really overwhelmed, how they're taking a disproportionate share of the caregiving responsibilities. Schools largely have remained closed for safety reasons. It has disproportionately fallen on the shoulders of women. We know women are doing literally a double or triple shift in the age of COVID.
And why does this happen? Why is it that when crisis strikes, women pick up the extra load? What is going on structurally within our society and our economy that makes this happen?
Very clearly, it's gender bias. It's very clear ideas that caregiving is women's work. Women do far more of the childcare and home responsibilities. On top of that, we're dealing with the fallout of government and larger policy failure, whether it's a comprehensive paid family and sick leave policy, whether it's the expectation that women can be leaders and sort of ensuring there are policies in place for that. Honestly, sometimes I'm like, where do we begin? Which problem do we focus on first?
I've been around a while, and I can remember the idea of women and liberation was drilled into me that you could have it all because you could do it all. And that's just not a reasonable expectation.
You cannot have it all, given the systems in place right now, given the way the workplace is structured, given the way society is structured, even where there are homes where there's a lot more equality than ever before. And research is showing, again, millennials in millennial marriages and millennial partnerships, heterosexual and homosexual, we see a better split, certainly among the genders, especially in heterosexual relationships. And still what we're starting to find is women do much more. If on paper it looks like, you're doing 50%, I'm doing 50%, the reality is when you actually track the numbers, that is absolutely not the case.
Of course, we can't talk about women and families in this city without talking about childcare, a huge problem in Seattle. It's expensive and hard to find, and COVID is now making this pain point worse. Is that accurate, Ruchika?
Absolutely, to such a large extent. And what was very heartbreaking for me is my son's childcare was faring pretty well and really in high demand, and they were providing great childcare. Obviously, their waiting list was ridiculous. I was on the list for almost 9 months. This was when my son was 1. And in COVID times, a lot of these childcare providers, they don't even have the resources, and so many are closing.
This brings up a really interesting point, Richika. Not everyone has the same level of choice when it comes to working and stepping back from the workforce. Nearly 2/3 of essential workers in this city are women, so we can't not do the job.
Yeah, and it's heartbreaking. In the beginning of the pandemic, I was just hearing these stories of mothers, especially mothers of color, who are facing disproportionate challenges. They were essential frontline workers. They had to report to work. They had no childcare, or some of them were facing huge financial hardship in other ways. They were sick or their families were sick. What I was surprised to find is I launched a small $250 weekly grant to be awarded to one woman of color, one mother of color impacted by COVID-19. And within the first, I'd say 24 hours, we had over 300 applications. It was just clear that the situation was dire. There are a lot of families who are not eligible for especially financial aid due to immigration status and other reasons. This crisis is awful, and it has impacted people everywhere, all over the globe. People are hurting, but it is really hurting, especially women of color, and especially women of color with children.
And then, broadly speaking, you have women who re-entered the workforce after having children, just getting their careers back, now being ripped back into this situation where they're back at home, making a decision to leave the workforce. This doesn't seem helpful in the long run either.
Yeah, a huge percentage of women are considering either leaving the workforce altogether in the United States or at least pulling back and going part-time where they can. We are really pushing back. We are going back in time when it comes to the gains that women have made. Again, in non-COVID times and non-pandemic times, we know that women have had a really hard time re-entering the workforce once they leave. Once you've had a child and you've taken a few years off because, again, due to lack of adequate childcare. So I think for a lot of women, making that choice is so heartbreaking because you're going to face disproportionate barriers to re-entry.
COVID has laid bare inequities at every single level. I wonder how we can use this information to make a positive change in the new economy after COVID.
Initially, when we were even getting into lockdown, especially for workers who can work from home, for me, I think there were a lot of women, including myself, who thought, we've been saying this for years, that remote work is an option. And being able to sort of schedule your work around your own schedule is super important, and it's possible. Obviously, looking at childcare and the huge disparities in the availability of a high quality, affordable childcare, I think that really got laid bare in this pandemic. And I think we started realizing that this is not just a policy or a government issue, but this is really something that businesses need to start caring about. If we, as an economy, if we're losing 800,000 women in a month, the way we need to reframe this problem is it's not a women's issue. It's a huge drain on our economy, on our resources, on our healthcare. I would go as far as arguing that it is a drain on our democracy.
Well, we're in unprecedented times, so maybe this is more possible than ever, Ruchika. Really good to talk to you, Richika Tulsian. Thank you.
Thank you.
Richika Tulsian is the author of The Diversity Advantage, Fixing Gender Inequality in the Workplace. Seattle Now is produced by Sophie Reed, Clare McGrane, Caroline Chamberlain Gomez, and Jason Pagano. Matt Jorgensen does our music. I'm Patricia Murphy. See you tomorrow.